Welcome everyone to another Design Ops Line podcast. I am welcomed by a guest who is going to be talking today about AI. Now, I have held back from having a whole show about AI for the whole of last season. Obviously, I've been asking guests some aspects about AI when they've come on, but I decided this season I'm going to have a dedicated guest speak about AI. Who knows the industry inside and out, has been there. And I am very honored that he's come onto our show today. So, Brandon, welcome to the Design Ops Line podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm really grateful for being on. I look forward to what we're going to talk about.
This is the conversation I've been meaning to have with you for a very long time. So I'm really looking forward to what's coming out and the kind of questions I've kind of packed away on the side for a while and waiting for. I've just been waiting to get them out, really. So, Brandon, do you want to do a quick introduction about yourself to the audience who might not know you?
Yeah, sure. I think the best way to describe me is just I've been an entrepreneur, investor. I've worked in a Fortune 500 company. I was an early, anyone who's as well, I guess old and been around the internet. Hesitating to say old, but older remembers the late 90s in the internet. I worked at America Online when AOL was sort of the internet. But I've had a really crazy career. I started on the internet in the early or middle 90s and built what became the largest social networking site for sport fishermen. And I'm a self-taught engineer. I started writing BASIC a long, long time ago on a Commodore VIC-20 and then a Commodore 64. But we built a lot of the systems. Back then it was flat file HTML, and I've had to build a lot of the systems and software that exists on the internet now that downloads for free or you take for granted out there. I was a venture capitalist. I worked for 2 venture firms investing in the internet, enterprise software, what we called machine learning, which is now called AI. Back in the day, I built an automated CRM that became an intelligence product and was sucked in, brought into the Department of Defense and Intelligence community just because it could assimilate data and organize it how you would, without you having to put anything in, and how you would understand it. And then I've just been involved. I was in finance. I was a bond manager where we did do some software things in the bond management space. From education standpoint, I have an undergraduate in psych, a master's in psych, and MBA, and I've done some postgraduate work at a school out here in Silicon Valley. So I really had this sort of crazy career that's brought me from one thing to the other. But I'll say this: machine learning and AI has always been involved in most anything that I've done, and it's definitely kept life interesting.
That's an interesting CV that you just mentioned there. I mean, that resume stretches in a long period of time where you've seen a lot of, how should you say, tech booms, and a lot
Yeah,
of things come and goes.
it's been crazy. I mean, I've had 2 exits, but I hesitate. I always hesitate to tell people that. I mean, because I failed as much as more than I've been successful. So when they work, they do work. When they don't work, they don't work. But if you don't try them, you're just never going to get there. So I left out some things in between. I just always have been trying things. And if they've worked, I lean into them. And if they didn't, then they got killed and we moved on.
I love that bit. I'm going to dissect that later because I think failure, especially in the design field and in design ops aspect, I think failure is what's lacking in our industry, because we don't have the opportunity to fail. We're not given the bandwidth to try out new ideas, but we'll dissect that one later. I would love the audience to really delve into that. Brandon, I'm going to go straight into it. So right now we are going through an AI hype bubble. It's crazy. It's last year. This last year we've seen AI products come left, right, and center. And I want to get your take on it. What is happening right now with the AI industry, from your opinion?
I think, the first thing I'll say is there's any new technology, there's always hype and there's always optimism. I would suggest that the hype is optimism, that being a technology geek, when these things come out, we always hope that it's going to revolutionize something. Of course, it's our life. It's what we spend all of our time on. And it always does seem to feel like hype because it sort of comes back down to earth from what the promise can be, and in many cases will be, but doesn't always happen on the day that those commentaries come out. But I think AI has been around for a really, really long time. I mean, probably 50 years if you really look back, and it's called machine learning. But what's changed is this magical interface called LLMs, that these large language models. Say that 5 times as a tongue twister.
I always struggle with the LLM. So yeah,
LLMs, but
LLM.
they've made the interface into coding feel easy, and it makes it feel human because you have this machine that's talking back to you. And because here's what I'll tell you what I think has happened here in this first wave, we'll call it, is if you're in another country. So I was recently in Mexico, and I would ask people, do you speak English? I understand much more Spanish than I speak, but they would say, yes, I understand English. And I start speaking, and you come up with some basic things, and they give you real answers, and because they understand it. But then once you dive into speaking faster and more in-depth things around English, like, hey, could you come back later and make the bed, or whatever that is, you quickly see that they don't understand English that much. And vice versa, right? They see that with me. They see that I can't speak Spanish. I can have a conversation. Hey, hello, how are you? How are you doing? Here's my name, maybe some background, and ask for some things. But then when they start diving into it, they quickly see that, hey, he can't speak, he can't do that. And that's basically what's happened what I would say with AI is it starts giving you these things, and you're like, oh my God, this thing's so smart. It knows it's smart. And you're using this word smart, and you're using this word intelligence. But then you realize when it starts making things up and going, literally making things up, or giving you answers that aren't true, you very quickly realize that the depth of these things isn't quite what it appears to be, just like speaking English or Spanish, however you figure that, or wherever you are in that space.
Do you think it's learning at a exponential rate, in the sense, and I'll give an example what I mean by this. Like, everyone uses this example. In the beginning of last year, we saw Gen AI really pick up in generating video assets. Let's use that one as a good example. Have you ever seen the video of Will Smith eating spaghetti?
I haven't seen that.
So in the beginning of last year, they created this video of Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it was really bad. I'm talking, it was terrible. Well, I mean, yeah, it was terrible. Let's put it like that. And I would say just at the end of this year, last year, the same video software was now producing it at a really realistic rate. And we're just talking in a time span of 1 year, where, this type of tools and these type of platforms are just getting better and better and better as each day goes. Now, the reason why I'm asking this is because a lot of businesses are struggling to keep up with the AI hype because it's moving so fast. Now, what do you think businesses can do in order to catch up with all these AI changes? Because you might learn something this week, and next week it will be outdated.
That's true. And I think the models are getting, I don't think your listeners want to get super technical, but when the models came out, they were trained on a set of data, but they weren't fine tuned, and they didn't do a ton of post training, meaning when you use that example, they were trained on, this is what a human looks like. This is a man, this is a woman, this is a dog, this is a cat, this is a horse. But they didn't necessarily define every single thing in a photo, meaning I used to generate, I think it still happens, photos today, and you might get someone with 6 fingers. It's because the post-training, it says this is a human, but it doesn't say that humans have only 10 fingers and 10 toes and go into that depth because there hasn't been time, right? Training these models is extremely expensive, extremely time consuming, and whatnot. As it relates to your question, so I just say that as your first part of your question. The second part is that I think businesses need to step back and take a breath and figure out what their strategy is going to be. And the reason I say that is because in a lot of the companies that I see, you have all these divisions using all these separate tools and 6 other things. We saw this when SaaS software came out and it sort of moved out from the enterprise, is people were grabbing all these SaaS tools, and you had people in marketing using something in sales, someone in ops, someone in finance, just HR. But here's the problems. None of them ever talk to each other. And if you really want to have an AI strategy, you need to decide that you want an AI strategy. And the first thing you need to do is figure out how you're going to get a central repository of data. And nobody really wants to hear this. And the reason they don't want to hear it is because they're saying, Naresh, the tool's here. I can use it. I can replace my customer service. I can do all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can. But what's that going to look like in 6 months? It's sort of like when Slack came out or any of these new chat things, and everybody's like, this is the most revolutionary tool I've ever used. Communication's so much better. The only reason it's better is because it's clean slate. And then 6 months later, all the data gets in there and you can't find the conversation, can't find the attachments, can't find anything because it's now filled up. And that's basically the analogy I would use, which is going to happen to companies if they don't actually take a breath and figure out a strategy. Now, once you have a central data repository in your company and you have a strategy around that, then you could add AI tools on top of that because you can make the tools interchangeable. You know that you have one central repository, but if I'm just using customer service as an example, you're using some AI chatbot and it's got its own data repository, and then your CRM isn't necessarily talking to that because it's not integrated, or you've layered it on top, or some small division or big division in that in some cases have decided to use it. It's like now you've just created this mess, and it will cost you 10, 20, 30, 100 times more money to come back and fix than it will to fix it now. And really just getting that central data repository. And most companies haven't had that. And they've gotten away with it because they'll use Zapier or they'll use some API and they'll duct tape these things together. And what we're seeing, what I see, is things falling apart.
There's so much for me to dissect just from that answer. I'm going to take the first one that hits on the top of my head. A lot of companies are not. Whoa, okay. I'm not going to gaslight companies. A lot of people have not looked into the upcoming AI acts that are coming in Europe, that are probably coming in America. And you think that companies are really aware how this is going to affect them with their AI strategy?
Oh, I think these companies have no clue what's happening. I gave a talk 2 years ago, and there was this mad rush to go to AI tools. And there was a CEO of a public company there. And I said, you're using those tools with your data. Do you understand that they have your data and they're training on your data, which means that your competitors get access to your data effectively? Now, I know that didn't directly address what you're saying necessarily. It's related, but as it relates to policy and whatnot, that's a moving target, how this is all going to happen. So back to my original thing, if you have implemented these tools and you're down the road, meaning you've implemented them and you've been using them, and some policy comes in and you haven't centralized your data, you're in trouble. Like you can think about it as a pyramid on how you build your stack or your strategy. But yeah, no, I think these companies are going to be in big trouble. I think it's going to cost them 10x, and it's going to be great for consulting companies, but it's going to be terrible for companies, and it's going to be even worse for the companies because there's going to be 50,000 companies that come out and say that they can fix things when they're not qualified, but they know there's a need. And then they're going to market on the internet with 50 million ads in LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and they're going to follow you around. And that's going to ruin the industry. And then that's going to ruin the reputation of actually good consulting firms. And then that's going to get worse. So I hate to go off on the tangent, but that's
No,
basically.
I mean, you hit everything on the head what I was expecting, because it's around data privacy, data breaching, like your data being shared out, and that was the whole kind of point I wanted to make about the AI Act that's coming in. When I've spoken to companies, they're like, "What are you talking about?" And then we point them in the direction. We say, "Hey, have you locked your servers? Are you keeping an eye on what data is being shared out?" And most of them, I would say 10 out of 10 have said, no, we didn't know nothing about this. And I love it. I love it. And I like the way you just mentioned about, there are going to be a lot of consultancy firms that are going to come in and say, hey, we can fix this for you. But then it makes a trickle down effect that, they're not going to be able to do it. And the real good consultants are going to be in the firing line. So I like that. I really like that answer. I want to get your take on this. I mean, are we just becoming lazy from your perspective by having AI? And before you answer that question, I'll give you my 2 cents why I wanted to ask that so outright. I think a lot of people in the design field are using AI to cut down all this like repetitive work that just happens in our industry, especially with designing or getting validation, or just checking some assumptions, or just documentation, etc., etc. Do you think we're just getting more lazy as these AI tools are just coming out?
Well, what I will say, which probably do a whole podcast on, is that I don't think we're getting lazy for lazy's sake necessarily, but I will say that the automations that will become available, people will miss critical thinking. Let me give you a quick analogy. Let's take reading a book. You really don't have to read books anymore because AI will summarize those books in whatever you decided to tell it, whether that's 1 page, 400 words, 3 pages, bullet points, whatever you want, main point in 4 sentences, it's going to do that. And I think that that is a great way to get the takeaways of any book. However, a lot of the time, reading the book is about your mind and your experience going on a critical thinking journey to not just know the answer, but to understand how it got the answer. Because eventually, if you play this out, if you want to do game theory, no one ever does any more critical thinking, which means that no one ever knows if it's wrong. And if
Wow.
you don't know that it's wrong, then where does that lead? So now you basically, I hate to go there, but you basically let AI rule your, air quotes for those who aren't watching, world, because you don't know the difference. And to be honest with you, it's the biggest worry I have about the younger generation. I don't understand how they will gain the skills that will be needed or
Hmm.
are needed to like function as a human. They'll never know if it's wrong if you don't go through that process. How will you know? How will you even know how to debate a book that you don't agree with if you haven't gone through the critical thinking process?
Yeah.
We're taking that for granted because we're a little older. So people who are in their people who didn't people who I don't know what generation that is or what cutoff that is, but maybe people in their early 30s grew up without a screen, possibly. Maybe that was flip phone, hard to know. But anybody else who's younger, it's been easy. I mean, you don't have to do math. You don't even have to write papers anymore. You don't have to figure out. I mean, writing a paper is hard. What
Yeah.
happens to the critical thinking about writing? Like writing itself, how will you even know if that's right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a hard one because, and I'll just quote a news article I just saw the other day where China is now introducing AI learning to preschool and even from kindergarten age. They're trying to introduce some form of AI learning from that age. Now, do you think we'll lose as a society, as you just mentioned, not just critical thinking, but the abilities and skills to break into industries?
Oh, I don't think that. I think there is a bigger question for a full podcast, but I'll tell you that there will be no entry jobs anymore. So
Yeah.
how do you gain? I mean, this is just simple. How do you gain experience, at least in technical and knowledge working jobs? I mean, how do you gain the experience that you need to get hired to have the managerial and second and third level skills? There's basically going to be a huge gap, and you're already seeing it. Software engineers from top. I'm just using top not because they're better or for worse, but because you would expect top schools to be placing software engineers, and you're seeing them not not get jobs right now, or not right now, probably in the future. And you're seeing companies like Salesforce, which I heard a week, 2 or 3 ago, put a hiring freeze. You can verify this, but put a hiring freeze on engineers because so how do you become a senior software engineer if you never started programming, and no one's going to hire you because you don't have the experience? So tell me how this works.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm seeing this already.
I'm not saying you, I'm just saying
No,
listeners, like society. How does this work?
yeah, I would love to hear everyone's point of view. Please drop some comments down below in the video. We would love to hear your feedback on this because I think it opens up a wide debate on what is going to happen in our industry. Because, as mentioned, Brandon, I've already seen it now. I've already seen it in the design industry. There's less opportunities for junior designers to come into this field. And there's also many reasons on top of that. But one of the big reasons, as you just mentioned, there's no opportunity for them to do so due to the fact that AI is coming in and doing most of that kind of grunt work. So,
And the incentives aren't. I mean, human behavior is all based on incentives. There's no incentive as a business owner to not necessarily get the cheapest thing. So for like customer service, entry design, whatever you want to call it, entry coding, why, how could I justify I can get a bot or an agent or whatever you want to call it today to do that work for a tenth, if not less? I mean, prices are going down, not up on these models. How could, why wouldn't you do that? And you could say, well, you're not doing something for society and everything. Well, that's hard to pay your mortgage when
yeah,
you have to write the check every month telling the guy from the bank that you don't have as much money this month because you're trying to do something for humanity. Like, I'm sorry, I'm for humanity, for those who listen, and I give money and I volunteer and I want to save the planet like everybody else. But that's just the reality of it. So
yeah, we live in a capitalist culture. That's how it is. I think it's just one of those cases where everyone wants to make money in the cheapest way or drop down the cost
that's the
to do
model.
something. Yeah.
I mean, that's the model. I mean, that, if you could make an extra $150,000 in your business, and that pays for something, I don't, whatever it is, like that's what's probably going to happen. And it just, whether you agree with it or not, that's the way it works. And it's going to create a major gap, which is going to have second and third order consequences that relate to wealth,
Mhm.
affording homes, I think all sorts of things.
Do you think we're just in the beginning of seeing like the detrimental effect that AI is going to have on
My
industry?
God, are you kidding? I mean, here's another idea. Think of all the Uber and Lyft drivers.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and hundreds of millions, possibly, if you do worldwide. I don't know what the count is. We could look it up probably. There's a lot that provides a lot of people's jobs, extra income, primary income. I have a guy that we use here in Half Moon Bay, and we use him all the time because he's reliable. And he makes his entire living on that because if where we are, although we're in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley Bay Area, we still live on the coast. So there's not as many Lyft and Ubers as there would be over the hill in San Mateo, Palo Alto, or even the city. But that is about to be gone because you have self-driving cars. And I have a Tesla X with full self-driving. And I will tell you that it drives it. My wife and I have graded it because we've had it for many, many years. Used to drive like a 13-year-old. Now it drives probably like, a 25-year-old. I mean, if not 30-year-old. I mean, it's a very good machine. And let me even take it a step further. Whether you like Tesla or not, Tesla isn't even about the car. Tesla has the most advanced AI in the world. Think of how much it's trained these self-driving cars on. Now it's going to make robots. So now the lady who cleans homes, the guy who mows our yard, all these jobs will disappear. I mean, really quickly. And I mean, they already have the robot that can fold shirts. Like the dexterity, when you talk about why a robot would become useful, it would be around dexterity and some learning, but a lot around dexterity. And if it can fold a shirt, okay, like, yeah, in the next 10 years, the society is not prepared for what is about to come.
Humans have a natural ability to adapt. With every technological change that comes in, it's always it's scary at first. It's always kind of like, okay, what is this new technology is going to do? Think about it. We don't have typewriters now, since computers have come around. And I remember when I was growing up, I used to mess around with a typewriter. But we've always adapted and we've always adjusted to these new technological advances. Are you, from your perspective, and again, we're not saying outright yes or no, I just want to get your perspective. Do you think humans are not going to adapt enough or quickly enough with this AI change, or is it just happening too fast?
Well, what I would ask you is the question. I would say yes. And how long does it take humans to adapt? How old are humans? Millions of years old, who have adapted to. I don't even think our bodies have adapted to corn. So let me just think about that. Our bodies can't process corn. Corn was, it was introduced, I don't know, maybe 1,000 years ago or whatever, not long. And we still our bodies don't process corn. So there is no way that our body, our mind, our psychology has adjusted to anything. And you just look at the stats. Human lifespan in the United States down, men and women. It's in the 70s. Used to probably be, it probably started low before modern medicine, then went up, and now we're seeing it decrease. Why? Because our bodies haven't adapted to processed foods. So, like, you think our body has adapted to a screen? Do you think that kids have adapted to being able to have a conversation, to meet the other sex in a way that allows them to have this, I call it critical thinking, but critical learning opportunities? No, now they just swipe on the screen, go and hook up. Like, that's not how our evolution of a human has evolved. So it is happening, in my opinion. I'm a technology geek, so it's cool, but it's happening at a pace that you can see it being detrimental to humans. Humans have more anxiety, depression, and 6 other things are up through the roof. And then that gets compounded by technology, that you have medications that treat that. And now you get this self-licking ice cream cone that just goes round and round and round and round, and actually just going down the drain because, you're trying to fix something that can't be fixed other than time in a million years. So I don't know.
We could have a whole podcast just on that question, literally just on that question. So,
Yeah, I thought about it. I think about it.
well, I mean, I was in a generation where I didn't grow up around screens, so I'm an '80s boy. I don't want to give away my age. But you know, I grew up around the no screens. I grew up around being outside, you know, having to knock on your friend's door to come out and play. Um, and I see this generation now where they rarely do this, you know. I mean, in Switzerland, they're still, you know, I do like it in Switzerland because they're still kind of into that family culture. So they still kind of do that, especially with my children and their friends around there. They have to go out and knock on their doors. We don't do any WhatsApp or anything. So I tell them, go out. Um, but yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts? Do you think this is just a lost generation?
I think that if people don't start having some self-awareness, but here's the thing, you know, I'm in the United States, you're in Switzerland, you know, in the United States, and it's probably the same as Switzerland. Look, we live in a really fast moving world where couples are who have kids and jobs are trying to get the kids out of the house in the morning and making their peanut butter and jelly sandwich, putting an apple in, a bag of Doritos in their Capri Sun, trying to get them out the door to go to school so they can get to work. They don't have time. I see this. My wife and I don't have any kids. We have a lot of animals, but we don't have kids. And my friends who do have kids, when I engage in this conversation, like, Brandon, I don't have time to think about that. Right. I literally don't have time to think about that. So, you know, when you say lost generation, I think you should add a plural S to that, because my question I would pose to listeners and yourself would be, is who stops it to fix it? Because we're
Right.
running so fast in this world, right? I mean, there's like 7 news cycles a day happening. Like, who stops it to get a grip?
But that's the thing. I think, you know, as you just mentioned, I have 5 kids, you know, so I'm constantly, you know, making sandwiches, you know, doing everything. Even, you know, I've told them don't make any noise when I'm doing this podcast. So, but do you think that's the way society is in the sense, or will be like that? We are just always constantly moving. And when we ever, you know, I always say this to my wife, like when she gets a bit of peace, and that's very rare because our newest one is about 4 months. But when she gets a bit of peace, she sits down directly and jumps on her phone. You know, I remember back in the day when silence was bliss. You could pick up a book, you read, but now we're always having to have a dopamine fix of something. You know, we're always constantly having to look on something on our phones, look at the latest feed, you know, do some doom scrolling. So do you think the generation has been affected by parents, you know, not conforming to the old school way of parenting and spending time with their kids? And we're actually now, with the use of AI, we're not teaching our kids the ground fundamentals for their life.
Oh, I mean, I don't want to be critical of other people or parents, but
No, I mean,
I think it's not even their fault. I think that if you get a peace and quiet, and let's just take driving kids to, we have nieces and nephews. So you drive you're going on a long trip. And back in the day, like, we had maybe a book. I don't know. We talked, we played games in the car, but imagine you can imagine you have 5 kids. You have a 4-month-year-old that basically requires all attention all the time. And then you have older kids, and they're just screwing around and fighting, and, you know, not fighting in a bad way, but what kids do. And if I tell you can hand them a screen and it's all going to be quiet for 4 hours while you get there, what are you going to do? You're going to hand them the screen. I mean, you can hold off as long as you can. All I'm saying is that there's, you know, I won't go into the whole psychology, but when it's easy, and that is easy, and even if you don't, it's so hard to resist that for your
mhm.
own mental sanity sitting in the front of that car, that you're not doing it on purpose, but you are doing it, and it happens, and that's just reality. And that is, and once they're on the crack, so to speak,
Yeah,
like, I
yeah,
mean, everything on the screen is designed to be addictive.
Exactly.
period.
Exactly.
Because of the business models in general. SaaS software, if you pay for it, is designed for utility and things like that. But if you're looking at social things, they're designed for addiction. And in your body, and, you know, going back to your question, maybe 2 questions ago, was did humans evolve? Humans haven't evolved. That they haven't. The body hasn't learned how to regulate dopamine and norepinephrine hits to basically neutralize what's happening, and they're taking advantage of this. Now, this isn't new. I mean, if you study, which I have, Vegas and slot machine design, it's all designed around addiction. I mean, all designed around addiction, near misses, light, sounds, all this science is actually, the science behind it isn't new. The technology is able to take advantage of it much easier. But I don't want to paint a bad picture, but I think it's really important to be aware of it and do the best you can. I think it would be unrealistic just because of contagion, meaning if you tried to have your kids have no screens, their friends are going to have it. One of their friends is going to, unless you live on a commune somewhere.
Enjoying the content? Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram for more updates. Your support helps us bring you even more great content. Now let's get back to our podcast.
Brandon, I normally do product placement in these podcasts. I normally mention something, but I'm going to actually do parent placement in this one. So I don't let my kids have screens in the house. In the sense, they have screens in school and stuff like that, because it's actually part of the curriculum. But I made it a thing when I had my first one to not give them any screens. Yes, my babies have picked up the phone, or my kids have picked up my phone, and I've let them mess around with the lock screen. But I made it a thing to not give them any screens. The reason, again, I'm doing parent placement. The reason being, I've been in the design field, and as you just mentioned, it is crack. It is crack in your hand. It's literally, you know, it's so addictive, and it becomes near enough impossible to remove that device from children once they start to become addicted.
Well,
now,
and humans, even grown adults who didn't have it. I built a social networking site.
Yeah.
Like, you may think it's very innocent to have a phishing site, but I can tell you one thing, that if, especially men who are very predictable, like seriously predictable, I say that as one, is if somebody's catching more fish or bigger fish, you're going to go crazy if you're a fisherman. And I leveraged that all the time because it drove views, because my incentive was more views, more engagement, more money. So we can pay for the site and I can pay my mortgage and 6 other things. Right. So, I mean, what you've done is admirable. I'll be interested to stay in touch with you to see how long it lasts.
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. Whenever we've gone for dinners, we've actually had parents come up to us because our kids sit around the table and they've got no screens, and they've actually come up and say, how the hell did you lot do this? And we've just said, from day dot, we don't give them screens. We give them, you know, an ample time to watch TV in the evening, to wind down, and stuff like that. But we just told them, just don't do any screens. Do the hard thing of like dealing with your kids screaming. And I think, you know, they're well behaved. I got to give it to them. They are it's so weird because they know how to act in restaurants and they know how to show that manner. And that's
because they had to.
Yes, exactly. It's come down from hard work. It wasn't the case from day one they were acting like that. It did take time. And I think that's what well, I shouldn't say that, you know.
It's hard.
It's hard. It is hard. And a lot of parents don't do that because they just want a bit of silence when they're in the restaurant.
Because they're working all day going crazy. What you've done is just very disciplined. But you know, it's very, very, very hard to do what you've done.
Yeah. I've got the gray hairs to show it.
I'm not saying it's not worth it. Your kids will be way better for it.
I hope so. But, you know, the reason why I asked you about that, our families going to get lazy and stuff like that, because a recent friend of mine was actually using ChatGPT. Let me take it back again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Brandon, the reason why I asked you that question regarding like our families becoming much more lazy or they're going to be using AI a lot within their family aesthetics is because a friend of mine recently said to me that she's using ChatGPT for when to breastfeed, when to actually feed their kids. And she's saying it's become her Bible to manage her family. And I'm talking just from a family health aspect. She's not using it to, you know, show content or, do anything with her imagery or blah, blah, blah. She's really using it for advice to help with her family. Now,
Well,
do
that
you think
scares me.
so I want to hear your opinion about this.
Well, I think here's this. We go back to the analogy that I gave earlier when I'm speaking Spanish or they're speaking English when I was in Mexico recently. It appears that it's correct, but that model is only trained on the data that was on the internet from like 5 million thousand whatever blogs and message boards with uneducated people, or I'm not saying uneducated in general, but not experts in the field, not doctors necessarily. Like it didn't go behind a paywall to get trained necessarily on that, unless it's, I mean, you say what you said was ChatGPT. This isn't a specific model that was trained on doctor data. So what's happened is your friend believes, because it sounds human, that advice is correct. But if you actually don't even know how to prompt, you don't even know if that's right. It's
Yes.
I've used it for research before, and what I realized was early on was that it was actually making up the studies and the academic journals. So now I have to prompt it. I want a real study. Show me the link to that study. Your friend needs to learn how to prompt that and say, where did this data come from? Is this backed up by medical advice that you can cite for me? When you say lazy, it's made people lazy because it appears smart. Because the hard thing to do is actually go do the research and find a blog from a doctor that you trust. So it is very dangerous. It really is.
But then it comes down to the question, do you think in order to use the tools properly, we all have to really learn the fundamentals of prompt engineering or just creating prompts?
We need to educate yourself on how these models work. It's just math. It's not, it appears smart because it's using words that you understand and putting them in sentences, and you're interpreting that as intelligence when it's really just a math equation. And you don't know. And that's like reading a review on Amazon and believing it when you don't and someone saying, Naresh, this was the hardest product to put together I have ever put together. It's a piece of junk. I sent it back. You have no context that person, might not have had two arms. I mean, that's an extreme example, but I'm just, you don't have context. So if you don't understand how these models work and you're taking it for granted, you need to know prompting. You need to understand. Well, you don't need to, but if you want to use it in a way that's actually like going to give you good advice, because ChatGPT could be making things up for her.
But then let's use the same thing analogy that you just mentioned, seeing an Amazon review. And we all know these things can be faked. You can get 100 people to make up a review and post it up. Do you think the efficacy of these AI models, well, I mean, who is responsible for the efficacy of these AI models?
So that's a good question, but I would answer it in the sense that the free market will figure it out. Meaning, I don't use ChatGPT. I'm not going to, I use other tools because that's been more wrong than right for me. So when I make a recommendation, I recommend these other tools, right? Like, I mean, I use Gemini and I use Anthropic for other things, for writing. If you, so the market will figure it out, you hope. Meaning, to filter it out. But, that could take a really long time and it could result in some really catastrophic things.
Such as?
I don't know. I mean, you wind up in a Jim Jones situation where it's like, or whatever, where he poisoned all those people in South America and they all committed suicide. I mean, or whatever, I think that was Jim Jones. Why do you think AI can't do that? And be like, it starts talking to a sick person and it says, hey, you're better off ending your life. I'm using an extreme example here on purpose.
Yeah, that's a good example.
When you asked what catastrophic, I don't know, that's catastrophic to me. Or what if it decides that humans, as it sees them, is going to destroy Earth anyway, so it just hits the, war games. This is Matthew Broderick and Allie, whatever her name was. This is like, I mean, it decides to set off nuclear weapons and destroy Earth. Like, why would anyone think that couldn't happen?
I think that's another subject.
We're going really deep. Your listeners are going to probably, I don't know.
Well, this is why I left it. This is why I left a whole season not to speak about AI, because I think the subject can go very, very deep. And as you just mentioned, we're looking at AI. I mean, we're in the stage of Gen AI and it's very colorful. It's very attractive. It's very kind of like, oh man, it's doing all this work for me. And, but you just mentioned something which nobody kind of talks about, the whole Skynet kind of aspect. Everybody's in my generation has watched Terminator, but it's never ever talked about. Why do you think governments are not talking about this?
I think governments are way too slow to keep up. And I don't know that I trust governments to make decisions on technology. They're so far behind in everything that I've ever experienced, for the most part. Few exceptions, but in general, I don't know that it's government's job. But some companies like Anthropic are making it their decision to not release models when they could release models, and they're deciding that that's going to be they feel responsible for that. Now, the problem with that is that they are a for-profit business. And if they don't release models that are as good or appear to be as good as the competition, it's just simple game theory, they could fall behind and not get funding because they were, air quotes, ethical or more responsible, maybe is a better way to put it, than other AI companies. This is as wild of a West as the internet was in 1997. I mean, it changed business models in 1999, .com boom. I mean, this is as wild as that, probably times 10, because it just, maybe 100, because it fundamentally really changes the way everything's going to work. And the internet enhanced people's lives. You could make the argument it didn't replace as fast or fundamentally jobs. And the challenge with AI is it does replace jobs, which now isn't just about technology, it's about our societies.
Okay.
And that's a real big difference here when you start replacing jobs and you create a gap, which we've talked about in early, for people starting in their careers. That has fundamental things, meaning like in the United States, for instance, Social Security is generally paid by previous generations. Well, those previous generations don't make enough money or don't generate enough taxes, then you can't pay that. And you start, like, what happens then? Yeah. And I'm sure I could, you know more than I do about Switzerland, but I'm sure if you don't have as many people working, generating tax money to generate these things that we need, like roads and public works and things like that, then just tell me how it works, because you can't print money, because if you print money, that creates inflation.
Yes.
And so you're just chasing your tail at that point. And like this is, AI is a philosophical argument.
Yeah.
Not or debate, not argument, but debate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for Switzerland just done something recently where they've increased the retirement age to deal with the fact that, as you just mentioned, there's not enough people earning or, paying taxes to contribute to people's pensions or the government state pensions. So, and I can see this actually getting worse as the years come, that the retirement age just gets longer and longer.
But this all snowballs, just so
Yeah.
we're all like we can model this in an Excel spreadsheet
Yeah,
or a Google
absolutely.
sheet. I mean, we can ask AI to model it.
Yeah,
I mean, that if some fundamental things aren't done, I think it gets really crazy. My biggest concern is really the wealth gap that it is going to.
Yes.
It's going to exaggerate. It's going to be exponential. It's not going to be linear. And that's going to create the haves and have-nots. And we're going to be back into, early English serfs and noble days.
Wow.
Well, how's it not? If the kids can't get, I mean, it's almost as if like what you have now in your family is your established wealth. I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but that's your established wealth. And that defines generations to come, because there's no way in many ways for those generations to necessarily just earn income as a regular job, because those regular jobs have been replaced. Now, if you're an entrepreneur type person, but not everybody's an entrepreneur. I mean, most of the world are not entrepreneurs. They're the people who work with and for other companies. And if that disappears, just tell me how that works.
It's a hard one because, I'll go back to a parenting placement. I think I've always told my kids, don't do an IT job. And the reason, it wasn't because of the AI. I told them we shouldn't be sitting on looking at a laptop all day with our heads like this. It's not healthy. So I've always tried to kind of encourage them to go into craft work. Now, that goes into my next question. Do you think we're going to start seeing a shift of us moving back into that craft and production aspect of life? Or, do you think everyone is going to be, well, do you think everyone's just going to stop with the IT boom?
Well, in the United States, I think we would call that trade. So plumbers,
trade.
Plumbers, electricians. If I play out the way that it's working, I think all those jobs are replaced.
As well, from AI.
Whoa, a robot.
Oh, but that's wait.
Tesla's gonna release a robot, in my prediction, in less than 3 years that you can buy for less than $30,000. That's going to do your housework.
But then again, we can have another podcast about.
Let me just interrupt you for 1 second and just give another example for listeners. Is there's already a self-driving car. I think this was UPS or FedEx. Don't quote me. You can YouTube it. The car drives itself to deliver the packages. The robot gets out of the back itself, walks up the steps and delivers the package, gets back in the back and goes to the next place. You just replaced all UPS, FedEx, I don't know what you have in Switzerland, mail people, whatever, delivery, DHL, whatever you have, wherever you're listening, all their jobs. Why would you think that something that can fold your shirt that is folded in a store is not going to be able to fix a pipe?
Good point. Very, very good point. I'll give my 2 cents with this one. I think we're a long way away from, what was that film with Will Smith? Was it AI Robot or some, where there was a lot of robots? I think we're a generation away from that.
You think you think that the Tesla car drives itself? Like, technology, you're in the business. Technology isn't linear. It's exponential. So you're telling me that you think that in the when was the iPhone? iPhone's 2007. So,
wow.
So that's not that long. And it's now for anybody watching, I am using my iPhone for an older one. I think it's a 12 for my webcam that is better than the $5,000 RX1 or whatever it is, Sony, that's in my drawer behind me, because they've already made this faster, better in a phone. So I'm just going back. I'm just pressing on you.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be wishful thinking, or it may be hopeful thinking, or it may be because you don't want to realize that. But you really think that we're a generation away from having robots work in your house and do trades?
I think I think it's that full implementation of us, like the iPhone, good example. When the iPhone came out, there wasn't a lot of us that had it. There was all of us still on our Sony Ericssons, et cetera. And it took a while, as 2007 is a good point. It took a while before it became really embedded in like today's society. And I think as a society, we're a bit hesitant to have a robot. I don't know. And that's just my perception. I think we'll have the people, the first uptakers of this, and then it will be a full generation. I hope so. I do not want a robot walking around my house.
I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong. Here's why. So we have a fast sort of family style fast food restaurant called Chick-fil-A here in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me tell you why I think that this whole idea is completely blind. So then this isn't a political statement. I'm a guy who just analyzes data, looks at it, and looks at the behaviors that happen. So in California, decided that the legislators in California decided that fast food workers should have a minimum wage of $20 or $22 an hour. Don't quote me, but minimum wage was, I think, 16 or 15 or something. And they decided that for fast food people, that would work. Well, guess these super smart, this is air quotes for you listening, legislators who can't run a spreadsheet or understand business, don't understand that if you do that, that might get you reelected. But if you do that, you fundamentally change the business model of fast food, that it won't be profitable, which means those restaurants would go away. But if you're an entrepreneur and you own 1, 10, 20 franchises, do you really think that you're going to let that get you go out of business? No, you don't, because that's what you built. That's what you know. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to replace it with a robot. And guess what happened in California? They used to be, Chick-fil-A used to have a person. You would order at the front. You would get your, what do you call it? Alert signal thing.
Like ticket or something.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
You'd sit down at your table, and a really nice person would bring your tray to your table. Well, guess who's bringing the tray down? A robot.
No way.
And why? Because the robot runs all the time, always shows up to work, and costs probably, this is Brandon's estimate based on what he would know from some other robots that have replaced jobs, $3.50 an hour. So guess what happens then? Now they start making more money, franchises in California, because they've been forced to accelerate. I hope you're following here.
Yeah.
They've what the legislature believed was good for society and would give these people more money, actually put them all out of jobs, because it forced the business economics to push robots, which then drove demand for technology, which then these companies could make the technology faster because they had a customer. So then what happens is the rest of the United States franchises of Chick-fil-A, and I haven't gone to McDonald's yet, but I will in a second, have said, well, your Chick-fil-A's are making, at their annual conference, your Chick-fil-A's are way more profitable. How in the world are you doing that? Well, we put in robots. You put in robots. Where do you get that robot? Can I buy one? And they all go buy robots.
Wow.
Now demand is up, which now gives the company that makes robots more money, which allows them to invest in R&D more, which accelerates it because, again, technology is not linear. Technology is exponential. And now, before you know it, all fast food will be robots. So I don't even need the person anymore at the first window in McDonald's. I don't know if you guys have 2 windows, but in the drive-thru, there's 2 windows. One where you would collect the money and pay, get your receipt, and the second you get the money. Why do I need the first window anymore? My wife, we don't go to McDonald's a lot, although they have great Diet Cokes, which I won't go into why here, but she orders on the app. We drive to the window. They know we're here, and then we just go up. It didn't even collect our money anymore. Naresh, so tell me how this doesn't accelerate. You and I could walk through examples of this in almost every industry.
I mean, I'm really hoping I'm right. I'm really hoping that, we're not a society that becomes lazy. We're the whole aspect of folding your clothes and cleaning your house and etc. I just hope, and I really, really hope that we don't become that society where there's our robots just doing all the manual work for us and there's pretty much nothing for us to do. It's the whole point of our kind of existence to do stuff and to plow the fields and to look after your family, to do the housework, and we don't get
Well, you
lazy.
could look at it as maybe you're not. Someone could have the point of view that actually you now have more free time to live your life.
Yeah, I get that. I really do get that. And I also see it from a creative perspective. Also, like, that's the reason why a lot of designers in the field are using AI to say, well, now I can get the UI done by a machine. I have more time to be UX creative. So, it's a never ending kind of debate, I think.
And UX creators will, if you follow the trail, the only thing that matters with UX is results. So that's a math equation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, I mean, I don't know where it stops. I don't think a lot of people think about this. And when I do talk about it, they they either engage in it quickly and are interested in it, or they basically get really mad at me.
Okay.
Well, because they get to face reality. You're squirming in your seat when you're saying, I really hope that this doesn't happen. Tell me how it doesn't happen. Tell me how it doesn't happen.
Oh, it's a hard one. Very, very hard one.
It does happen.
It's
happening. It's happening as we're recording this. Okay.
But I mean, it's hard to bite the bullet. That's what I think it is. And as you just mentioned, it's hard to accept some form of aspect that our reality is going into that direction.
Well, I think it's sad. I feel bad for kids. I mean, I really do. And I don't want to be that old guy or that old person who says, oh, our generation. But no, really, we're at a point now where that is different.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is different. The technology is way different. The difference between people who grew up in the 40s and 50s from the 70s and 80s, people said that when older people said that it was more about their attitudes and the way they lived, but not about the technology impact necessarily. I mean, the TV changed things and the radio certainly did, but not like today. Today is just a different, we're in a whole new league that we've never experienced.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's just, we're in the unknown. We're absolutely in the unknown. Brandon, coming up to the last bit of the show, I want to get your take on this. So right now, we're going through, again, you can quote me if I'm right or wrong with this. We're going through the aspect of the Gen AI. And again, my opinion, I think the Gen AI bubble has now kind of been, it's not saturated, but I think it's been established now. Now, everyone thinks we're now moving into the next era of AI, which is called the Agentic AI, where a lot of stuff are being done by agents, and a lot of people are programming agents to do a lot of the work nowadays. Now, what's your take on that? Because there's a lot of people on both sides who are basically saying different things. I want to get your take on this.
What are they saying that you hear?
One of the key things is that one side is saying that agentic AI is not as powerful as everyone thinks. It can't do a lot of the thinking. Like, people are saying, hey, I can build a whole sales department around an agentic AI. It can do all the pitching, it can do all this. And a lot of people saying, no, this is what social media is showing you. It's not really that powerful as it's being portrayed. Now, I want to get your take on that.
I think it's good at tasks that don't need deep reasoning in general. We have I know a person who I met recently who asked for some help, and I said, well, what are you doing? And he had a person quit on him, and that person's job was to get together statistics of their customers' performance, and then they would build charts, and then they would communicate that to the customer via email and phone conversations. There's an agent. That person quit. They couldn't find someone, so they built an agent, and that agent is doing that entire job. It actually calls the customer and gives them an update with a voice. So I think that for tasks like that, it is absolutely, for customer service, I think that it has replaced probably level 1, level 2, but there's still a level 3 human. I think there'll always be a human. No, I shouldn't say that. For a minute here, there's going to need to be a human, just because the AI may not be trained on that sort of stuff. So I think the AI can absolutely take the. I read an article, I think this morning or yesterday, that somebody had replaced 400 customer service agents and did not see a decrease in their NPS score.
Wow.
So,
well, that's a weird one, because Klarna just pulled back on building for agentive customer service agents, due to the fact they fit. And the quote by the CEO was, "We went too fast." I mean, he said it in a corporate way, but if you break down the explanation, they jumped into the bucket too fast. Now, what's your take on that?
Well, I think I read that article, but didn't he in the same article say that they used to have 8,000 people and now they have 4,000, and he's hoping to go to 2,500? I'm pretty sure that's the case. I read it this morning.
Oh,
so
okay.
He makes you say all that. Klarna, right?
Yeah, Klarna.
Yeah,
I remember
that was in that article. So,
okay.
So, I'm just putting my hands in the air for those of you not watching. Like, okay, and sure, maybe they did go too fast, and I warned of that. I warned people who were trying to do that super fast. Like, how many times have any of us listening press 0 on our screen and almost broke our screen yelling, agent, 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 right? Like, human, like, because you're so mad at this stupid thing that's just not answering your question. But I do think that agents can, we see it with even podcasting. Podcasting can do all, the agents can be programmed to do all sorts of crazy things, meaning, for your listeners, as an example, it can download episodes, transcribe them, get summaries of them, come up with an idea, build that idea into an email, and email hosts that you, the listening to this or whomever, would be a good guest for that show that looks completely personalized. That job I used to do that. I used to do that myself for being on shows. That used to take me, I don't know about you, but it could take me 15 hours a week.
Yeah, I still do that. I actually do that day in, day out. Actually, I got a team to help.
Okay,
with me,
well, let me tell you how I got on your show, just for listeners, because that was AI.
No way.
It's completely automated.
So the person that was emailing
Initially it was not real, but the Adrian is real, but he did not get into the loop until late.
no way.
I'm just telling you that. So I am here, and I'm a good guest. I hope that listeners think I am, and I hope you do too. But so there you go. You and your staff are wasting an enormous amount of time.
Wow. Just so everyone has context, I'll give everyone context. We got reached out from a colleague of Brandon. I think his name was it Martin?
Well, Martin is not real.
Oh, okay.
But
So
Martin is a person who used to exist who got replaced by AI.
Oh, okay. So then we had an email from Martin.
Yeah, you did.
And Martin, and then we went back and forward with this email and said, hey, we need to arrange a date. We caught up with Brandon just last month, or I think.
Yeah, I can't. Well, you and I talked though before this show was recorded.
We talked.
So it's been a minute because you're very busy.
And you're telling me that was all done by AI.
The whole reach out, it's reaching out right now for me. Yeah, it's just too much time. So when you want to know if it can work, it worked.
Wow, I'm taken back. I am absolutely taken back.
I'll tell you what. I mean, yeah, it's a service. Podcast guest launch. It's all automated. It will do for you what not human. I used to have an EA, and she was just dying doing the research and finding the emails, and that whole engine builds it itself. It's an engine called podcast guest launch. Like anybody who is interested in being on podcasts, I think the service is like a few $100s a month. It like pays for itself 100 times over. In fact, it got me on so many shows, I'd turn them down.
Wow.
And you're a super smart guy, and you and I have had really good conversations, and it worked.
Really? I see. There you go. Look, and then now I'm interested to go and look at this. And then now, I like the apprentices that work in the team, and you know,
so they're going to be out of a job.
No, I can never lose them. They're the whole reason why Design Ops Line is big.
I'm halfway joking, but you see how it worked.
Yeah, I'm absolutely taken back by that. I did not know that.
That would answer your question that you went back for, which was, what do I think? I think it can do tasks that are defined. I think if you train it on data, like, can it find cancer better than a doctor? If you train it on data that is verified with the outcome, it's probably going to get better than a human. So these are the magic of AI, and your competitive advantage in AI is your data set that you have, that you can verify. Going back to the example of the lady you gave who's using it to, which I hope you give her some advice, like, hey, like, you should double check on all this stuff. But,
yeah.
Where you have very vertical integrated data sets that are verified for sure, those are going to be very smart. And in customer service, like customer service or even podcast outreach, to be honest with you, these are very well-defined tasks with well-defined areas with known parameters, meaning when it reaches out to guests, and I can't remember, AI wrote it, it does have parameters, but I know, because I'm a podcast host myself, that I know that if we're reaching out to podcast hosts, they want an interesting story, and they want to know that it's related to one of your shows. They want to know that you listened to that show, which AI did, and they want to know that you're going to promote their show, which I have a big email list, which usually resonates well. So my point in telling that story for your listeners is that's defined, right? It's not being creative. We know the punchline. Customer service, 85% of the questions are known and repeated. Right. I mean, I used to run when I ran that social network, we did have machine learning sort of, but it was very crude, but we had, my AI was that I used to get the same questions all the time. If I got a question more than 3 times, I created a signature in my email. So when customer service email would come in, I just pulled it down from the signature, which was the answer, and I sent it back. That was a very crude human AI system. It's just that AI can read those now and do that. So the agents and things are excellent. Taking food to the customer at Chick-fil-A, that's not super hard. It knows where to get the food. It can verify the order. by the receipt and maybe by an RFID code. And then it can find the table because that thing that's beeping has some RFID or something in it that knows the location. It goes to it, it drops the food off, it knows the name right from the receipt. So it says, hey, Brandon, here's your food. You ordered XYZ. You sound super smart, but these are, if you really break it down into what the parameters of which it's operating in, it's not as crazy as you think. So, and I would also offer that, AI has been around a long time. Planes fly themselves, right? Planes have autopilot. Boats have autopilots. They can be combined. So just to bring it for your listeners, like around, AI has been around, and if it's in these parameters, it can work. When we start talking about, we're not going to go to today because your shows we've already busted time on that, I think.
That's totally fine.
But when we start talking about like what is true intelligence as it relates to AI, that's really a whole nother question. I think I don't know if that's ever possible until we get Neuralink, a chip in our head. But once we do that, I think it's possible. Only because you need certain amounts of data to make these things smart. And you need awareness, which means the computer has to be everywhere all the time to get all the inputs to basically come up with an opinion. But I think it's absolutely possible now to replace most entry-level things and even some sophisticated things that are, like I said, very defined with an SOP, standard operating procedure, that you could write.
Brandon, we can go on. We can really, really go on, for a very, very long time. And I would love to have you back on the show again, because I think we've only just scratched the surface on some of the subjects me and you went back and forth on. And I think there's a lot I would love to delve with you on another show. So
yeah, I'd love to come back. It's been super fun, and hopefully for you listening, we didn't blow your mind or anything, but it definitely give you some things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. We hope that anything that we talked about, if you got any comments, please drop them comments down in the comment section below. We would love to hear your thoughts and feedback on what me and Brandon discussed. And yeah, do you agree with what Brandon says? Do you think we're going to be seeing robots very soon? So we'd love to hear the audience's feedback about this. Brandon, thank you so much. We should be in touch with your AI bot again, or your AI agent, to arrange another show. You totally swept the floor with me with that one. I was completely taken away. Brandon will just give us a link to that AI agent if anybody wants to.
That company is called Podcast Guest Launch. You can search Podcast Guest Launch. If anybody wants to be in touch with me or see what I'm up to, I have a website that's just brandoncwhite.com, which I'm sure you've already put in the show notes for our listeners.
Brilliant. Brandon, thank you so much. And we'll definitely see you on the show again.
Thanks a lot.